Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your boy Zonicality. So, I recently watched The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan, and honestly, as someone who is not that big of a movie person, I don't watch a lot of movies. It was pretty alright for me. Since I don't watch movies often, I couldn't necessarily critique it in a way that someone would do with camera action, camera work, any CGI used or practical effects or long shots. But overall, to me, as someone like casual that just watches movies every now and then, how directing wise, it was very good, very good. I have no issues with the camera work and the effects and any of the practical stuff. I have no issues with that. The casting, it's like beating a dead horse. Do I think they should have casted Helena of Troy as Luke the Denango? No, I don't think so. Nor do I think that there should have been so many diversity in the movie because it was so diverse. It looked like ancient Egypt. That's just beating a dead horse at this point. What I really want to talk about is the mythological aspect and how it was portrayed in the movie. So we're gonna go through this one by one. I only have really a few major things that I have issues with. For one, let's just go over the good things. I do like how they were able to chop a lot of the story down into something digestible for the average viewer who does not know a lot of Greek mythology. If you know anything about the Odyssey, it is well, the Odyssey and the Trojan War, it is a very, very long conflict, and it takes a good few chapters. I think in total, with the Trojan War and the Odyssey, there's like 17 different chapters or 17 books, so to say, written by Homer. It's very nice that they were able to shorten it into something digestible. That did come with a problem, to where some of the pacing was a little bit rushed, especially in the beginning. However, I don't have too much of an issue with that because when you have to fit so much mythology into one movie and you can't make it into three, I could understand why that the pacing was a little bit off in some aspects. My criticisms of the movie, again, some of the casting just did not fit. Just sort of goes back to the casting overall. If you have seen any pictures of, let's say, Athena or Telemachus or Odysseus's cast was fine. I don't got issues with Odysseus's cast. Maybe some with Penelope, of course, Helen of Troy, Menelaus. He was alright. Agamemnon. I absolutely loved Agamemnon. Even though he did not say much, he was very menacing, especially during the sack of Troy. So honestly, Agamemnon, my favorite character out of the entire movie. Even though his screen time was very, very short, he definitely felt like the king of Argos, which he was in the myth. One thing, the acting, love the acting. It was very good. Sometimes I think for the soldier that was outside of the Trojan horse, forgot his name because even in the Greek myth, it's like such a nobody character that I don't even think they're even named in the original myth. The acting felt a little short from that person. However, overall the acting was pretty good. I don't have that many issues with the acting. For now, my criticisms. For one, it's a very minor criticism. Athena. Now, in the myth, Athena isn't exactly a very, how should I put this? She isn't exactly that hands-on talkative with Odysseus in the actual myth. She's a lot more talkative here in the movie. She's a lot more human. She isn't exactly godlike as in the sense of only really comes and gives like very, very subtle hints. Like she always talks with Odysseus in the movie. She never talks to him that much in the actual myth because she's off doing other stuff for other heroes. She's talking to other people at the same time. Now, frankly, my knowledge on everything regarding the Odyssey between like all the characters is a little bit short-sighted at the moment because I do have to reread the myth from time to time just so I can get my knowledge back on straight. But besides that, Athena was just a little bit too talkative for me. I feel like she could have been a little bit more subtle. She didn't always have to appear at Odysseus' side and had to directly say to him what necessarily the issue was. Now, of course, there was some scenes that were actually pretty good. She was just standing there looking at him, like the one scene where um they went on to the one island, and two ships of his crew was completely destroyed, and two ships of his men were dead by the metal figures. I forgot their names. At first I thought they were automatons, but then I was like, no, they couldn't be automatons, because that's something different entirely. Hello, everyone. Editing zonicality here. I just came in here to say, to make a correction, that the island wasn't actually, men weren't actually automatons. They were Laestrygonians. I had to search it up to remember, because I knew they weren't automatons. When I was talking here, but I just couldn't come up with the name off the top of my head. And yeah, so it was cannibal eating Laestrygonians, which are basically giant cannibals. And the thing is, they made another change, which I have to just say real quick, is that for some reason in the original myth, he actually had 11 ships full of crew members who actually died instead of two ships. So he lost around 72 men, if I remember correctly, from those 11 ships being destroyed by by the Lestrygonians. So why did they decide to cut that bit out and lessen the number of ships, when he could have used, if he did, I know Christopher Nolan doesn't like to use CGI, so he could have made like smaller ships and like filled it with like mannequins or something. I don't know, something that would like put the actual number of ships there that were lost to make it, a whole lot worse. Because Athena shaking her head to Odysseus losing two ships is, something, but losing 11 ships, then that would like put the scene in a much more brighter, not brighter, but darker light, because Odysseus had really messed up. That's all I wanted to say. This is editing Zone and Cali, so you'll probably hear me a little bit more times if I have to make another correction. So yeah. So that's why I said that my knowledge on Greek mythology, not Greek myth, but the Odyssey needs to be refreshed a little bit. So, because I don't necessarily remember that scene specifically, but it was a good scene nonetheless. And Athena's disapproval, I do like her shaking her head. And I feel like they could have done that a little bit more with her character, just giving visual cues instead of having her talk a lot. It made sense for her to like wake him up at the end when he made it back to Ithaca, but I feel like she could have just been a little bit more motion heavy instead of verbal heavy. Another thing with Athena, her armor, if you don't know how she usually is dressed, or how she is described as being dressed in Greek mythology, she never usually has just a robe on. If she has just a robe on, it means that she's disguised as someone else. One story of this is with Arachne, the mortal woman who challenged her to a weaving competition. In some stories she won, and in some stories she lost. But either way, she was disguised as a old lady who wore just drapes over her body. But usually Athena is depicted as wearing drapery, but also her armor. And she usually never has it off, including her helm, or having her spear and her shield Aegis at always ready and at her hand. So in this movie, she never exactly has what she is described with having all the time, because she never really takes it off in Greek mythology. She always has that certain she always has her armor on, and her weapons. So I feel like they could have done something more with that, to where she would have had all of her armor on, because she only really appeals to Odysseus in his mind. She's never there physically, because no one else sees her. We know this because when Odysseus makes it back to Ithaca, and he's dressed as a beggar, which he was in the myth. When he's dressed as a beggar and is talking to his wife Penelope through the door, the screen door. Pretty sure that it is a screen door. He reaches out to Athena's hand, and she reaches back out at him, and Penelope doesn't see her. And one more thing about this too is, I don't know why they specifically made Athena cry when Odysseus was describing what the Greeks done at Troy, because the gods who were on the side of the Greeks knew what was going to happen when Troy fell, when Troy fell to the Greeks. It was going to be ransacked, and the people were going to be killed. We know this because of one of the mortal women who was on. I keep forgetting her name. I really should not be forgetting these people's names. Cassandra. in Greek mythology, Cassandra was a priestess who was dedicated to Apollo, and she broke her oath. And although she was gifted with foresight, she ended up being locked away in Troy because she was seen as a not a heretic, but she was seen as crazy. And even though she saw the fall of Troy, because the gods gifted her that foresight, meaning they had that foresight too, Paris still took Helen, even though Cassandra specifically said not to take Helen. So for me to see that Athena is also crying, even though she knew what the Greeks would do, she foresaw it as well. I'm pretty sure all the gods had the ability. Editing zonicality here again, and just to make another thing, Athena absolutely knew that Troy was going to fall and how it was going to fall, and she even orchestrated the entire thing behind it. So yeah, she definitely knew Troy was going to fall. So that's all for Athena. There's nothing else more to say with that. I don't necessarily have that much of an issue with her casting with Zendaya, because even though Athena is a very charismatic woman, a very short speaking woman, she can get her point through with just little words. I'm not going to harp on the casting choices because I feel like it would just be beating a dead horse. Everybody harps on the casting choices. I harped on the casting choices, so I'm just not gonna be beat on a dead horse. My next issue, the it is the scene with Siri. If you don't know how the scene with Siri went in actual Greek mythology, it went very different to how it went in the movie. In the movie, the Apollo ship comes across Ceres Island, which contained and housed the goddess Cere, who was a demigod, basically, because she was the daughter of Helios, the god of the sun, and Perse, a nymph. On the island, she turns people who comes to her island into animals. That's basically her whole thing. And during the scene, which I do actually like when she turns them into animals, because when Odysseus's men go to Ceres' main little small cabin, she makes them all food, and Odysseus's men all stuff themselves like pigs, right? Because they're so desperate to eat, because they have such little resources, and they were on the ocean for days. So Siri turns them into pigs for, of course, eating like pigs. And I do actually like that scene, and I don't have issues with it because she did turn Odysseus's men into pigs. So I don't have issue with that. What I do have issue with is how the actual story went down in the movie between her and Odysseus, because it deliberately omits one of the reasons why Odysseus's journey took so long. And it was because he was at the mercy of Cere, who at first refused to let his men go when he came up to her and basically asked, "Hey, can I have my men go?" And she said no. Of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but it it's just very bad that they left that out, because it's one of the reasons why Odysseus stays at the island so long, because she forces him, practically forces him to sleep with her in order to save his men. And because of this, those two have a son together named Latinus. Oh, actually, he has multiple sons by her. My fault. I just had to search that up. He lives with her for a year straight and has multiple sons with her in order to convince her to turn his men human. And once she does turn his men back, then they are able to leave. So why did they omit that from the movie? Was it because of the source material of the Odyssey that they used, which was notably that specific feminist retelling? Yeah, so it uses Emily Wilson's version of the Odyssey, which frankly I'm not going to harp on her for being a feminist, because it just wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right of me to harp on that. However, it has so many modern conceptions that differentiate and lowers some of the atrocity, and harpens some of the atrocities from both the men and women of the story. This comes to fruition when you cut out the main reason as to why Odysseus has other children and why he had to stay with Ciri for a long time. And also, it just makes it lowers the credibility of your adaptation or retelling. Sure, you can adapt something, but you have to make sure that it's not deliberately leaving anything out that was important to the overall story of the Odyssey. Hello, everyone. Editing Zonicality here again. Just wanted to say if you don't like the fact that I said that this was a feminist biased translation by Emily Watson, then here are some images of a article that was reviewed by someone who had access to a actual professor who knew stuff about the Odyssey, and it was concluded that this was a bad biased translation. So take it how you will, but this is how it is. It was a bad translated bias thing of the Odyssey. And Odysseus's 1 year stay on Aea, which is the island that Ceres stayed on, is very important to his story because he has children with her and because it's the only way he's able to get his men back. Another thing is Calypso, which I feel like they didn't do Calypso too off of character. If you don't know who Calypso is, she was a nymph, and even though she in the myth detained Odysseus for 7 full years against his will, it just it doesn't make sense why she would do this again. Why they would omit a reason to why he stayed so long in the first place, because it wasn't because he continuously ate the lotus flower. In the actual myth, Calypso never gives him the lotus flower. I'm just rereading over this now. This could be from translation to translation, but she doesn't give him the lotus flower. He always knows he has a family back home in Ithaca. He always knows he has his wife. Calypso detains him and keeps him there against his will, because if you don't know nymphs, in Greek mythology, nymphs are very, very powerful beings. And if they get a hold of you, they're really not letting you go, especially if they find you attractive enough. They're not going to let you go. So Calypso detained Odysseus for 7 full years, not letting him go and not feeding him the lotus flower like how she did it in the movie. Even though she would promise Odysseus immortality if he stayed with her, he always wanted to go home. And it wasn't until other gods came to tell Calypso to let Odysseus go, it was only till then that she let him go. Otherwise, she never would have let him go. It wasn't because of her seeing his want to go home and letting him remember. No, it was because she did not want to let him go, and the other gods forced her to let him go. So that's another major change, and that's one thing I just don't like, is when you deliberately change the main reasons as to why a character goes through something, or the main personality or actions of characters, in order to push a narrative. And that's just something I cannot get down with. However, when he makes it home, I do like when Odysseus makes it home. I do like the last scene. I do like the fight scene. One thing I do have an issue with is Odysseus and Telemachus not fighting together like how they did in the myth, because him and Telemachus fighting together. One, Telemachus was was a great warrior, and because he was the Prince of Troy and he had to train to be able to take his father's place. And those two fighting together and basically slaughtering the suitors who were after Penelope's heart was more or less Telemachus being able to realize that he can take his father's place when eventually he does go. So I don't have that much of an issue with his return to Ithaca. It's pretty alright. One of the scenes I do have an issue with, though, again, is when Penelope is talking to Telemachus, and Telemachus is saying that he will have to take the throne of Ithaca, and Penelope comes out of nowhere with saying that, oh, you think a woman can't take this throne because only a man has taken it? I have sat on this throne for 20 years. Like, you can obviously tell of the narrative of of that dialogue right there, of the I'm just be straight on. It's modern feminist dialect that goes with shoehorning in your face that women are equal to men, which there is no issue with. But when it comes out of just out of line, out of nowhere, when it's quite clearly forced with one of the main characters, basically the main heroine of the story, then it's like, oh, okay, I it's like I can't take this seriously, because why would you add that? Why would you make it so obvious that this was just a narrative push? Why would you do that? Makes no sense. When the story ends, Odysseus self exiles himself. Well, in the movie, after defeating the suitors, he self exile. Oh God, I can't speak. Exiles himself from Ithaca to let his son Telemachus rule. That is not what happened. I'm gonna be honest with you, that is not what happened. He was Ithaca for another good years because he was prophesied to die gently of old age. Now in other stories after the Odyssey, like the Telegagni, Odysseus has another voyage to where he goes to the land of the Sportians. I got to make sure I'm getting that right. I'm reading off of my second monitor, and he marries another queen called Calidus, which is a place in Epirus, the Greek region of Epirus. He wins wars. He does a lot of king stuff. When his second wife technically died, he went back to Ithaca, and he left his son that he had with Calidus, left him to rule Despotia. He leaves back towards Ithaca, and then there he dies by the hand of one of his sons with Siri, called Telegonus. Not Telemachus, but Telegonus. Funny thing is that is that by the advice of Athena, Telemachus would marry Siri, and then Telegonus would marry Penelope. But that's just another thing entirely. It's like after the events of the Odyssey. So the only real issue is that Odysseus abdicated his throne, which he never did. However, I'm not gonna harp too much on it. Another main issue I had was with the relationship between Menelaus and Helen. In the movie, when Telemachus visits Menelaus in search of any news about his father, Odysseus, there is the one scene where Menelaus grabs Helen by the chin, forces her to look at him, and she is crying, signifying that there is some level of abuse. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, they made that shit up. They made it up. Because after the events the of the Odyssey are over and Menelaus and Helen return back to Sparta, they live in a very loving relationship that never is described to have any sort of abuse in it. Never is. In Homer's end to the Odyssey, when Menelaus comes back, and there was a little bit of dialogue between Menelaus and Helen, or little depictions. They are never abusive in any way. They made that up for dramatic effect. A very inaccurate dramatic effect of Menelaus's character. The only time when Menelaus was some sort of violent towards Helen was when she was retrieved from Troy, and he threatened to kill her because of her infidelity. However, she never was killed. There are four different versions of how that story goes down. Is that when Menelaus got Helen from the conquered city of Troy, he was about to kill her. When he saw her crying and begging for her life, Menelaus's anger immediately left him, and he took her back as his wife, and he never harmed her after that. He never did anything towards her. The second version, Menelaus was going to kill Helen, but her beauty prompted him to drop his sword and take her back to his ship to quote unquote punish her in Sparta, and to which she was never punished at all. Next, according to the Biblo Lithica, Menelaus would raise his sword in front of the temple in the square of Troy to kill her, but when he saw her rendering his clothes in English, were her clothes in English, and basically she seduced him by revealing her chest to him. He dropped his sword and took her back because of seduction. A similar version, in the Lion's Conquest, by Stetsi Chorus, Menelaus surrendered her to his soldiers to be stoned to death. But when she took off her clothes, the Achaean warriors were stunned by her beauty that the stones fell harmlessly from their hands as they stared at her. So once again, seduction. So in all the stories, all the versions of the story, two of them, she uses her body to seduce the men into not killing her, and in the other two, Menelaus takes pity on Helen because of her beauty, or because of the fact that he still loves her, and he takes her back without issue and never resolves to hurt her in any way. So once again, he never hurt her in any way, and he never was abusive. Even though both of them never had any male heir together, once again, they never were hurtful towards one another either way. So once again, they made that shit up. It's just very wild to me with the amount of liberty that they took with deliberately changing characters in the story. Now, sure, he could have been a little bit violent when he got back Helen. However, that's never shown in the movie. So, as much as we're concerned with, if you actually take a look at the myth, they both are happy together, and the fact that Helen was crying was just absolutely insane. So that's all of my issues with the movie. I do love the Cyclops scene. I feel like it was very faithful to how it actually happened in in the myth with them hiding amongst the sheep. I'm pretty sure the only slight change was that I'm pretty sure it was either Zeus who said to hide among the sheep in order to make sure that they're safe. I do love the fact that Odysseus's men are very loyal to him. There was one line to where it said, one of the characters said that Odysseus's men were that they defied his orders. Now, while that did come true for the end of the movie, everywhere else they did not disobey his orders. In fact, they were very loyal to Odysseus because he was respected enough among his men and commanded the total loyalty of his men that they went through absolutely everything with him just to stay by his side. So, other than that small line, I don't have issues with Odysseus's men. That's basically all my gripes that I can think of at this moment in time. The only real thing I wish to happen more was that there were more scenes of the gods, because we only really got Athena, even though the gods were very much essential to Odysseus getting home. I just really do feel like that they could have shown more of the gods. One thing I wish that they did was that when he went down to Hades, he didn't speak where I mean he did speak with that did he speak with that one? No, he didn't speak with that one soldier that died outside the Trojan horse. No, he spoke with his mother, Anticlea, and of course the blind prophet that we see on the ground when he commits the blood sacrifice to summon all the shades to Tiresias, to how to basically learn how to return home. And also he speaks to Agamemnon, which he does in the movie, which I'm very glad that he do. But he also speaks to Achilles, someone who also was slain during the Trojan War. And I feel like they really could have done that. They could have put his mother Anticlea or Achilles in the movie, and I really feel like they should have done that. However, otherwise his little bit in Greece, it was fine to me. One thing about the many island scenes when he lands and when his ships land on different islands is that it goes through basically like a three-phase thing. He and his men lands on the island. They come across something, and then either that turns out to be bad. It could usually it turns out to be bad after like a series of events. It turns out to be bad, and they run back home to the ships, and either they lose men or they lose ships. It never exactly changes. I'm pretty sure during some times in the island he went home without much issue. Pretty sure even in Hades the shades did not chase him. The only thing that he learns of in like the Hades period, when he goes down there to Hades to speak with the shades, he learns that of course his men must not touch Helios's cattle or death will come for his men, and he speaks to his mother and others about the troubles at his home. It's a lot of changes. I feel like that they kept a lot of stuff out which was important, and they put some non-important stuff in, and also kept a lot of important stuff out, which I understand what they had to do with a time frame of like what 2 hours, 3 hour movie, 2 hours 53 minutes. So yeah, I understand that they had to cut back a lot of things. I'm pretty sure honestly, if they made a full-fledged nothing cut out movie, it would easily be the length of Gettysburg. And if you don't know how long Gettysburg was, it was a 4 hour 31 minute movie, but probably it'll be like closer to 5 hours because there's so much stuff that has to be put in if they were to do a fully fledged movie. Other than that, like scene wise, I don't have many issues. Direct casting wise, it's just beating a dead horse. I can complain all day about how it wouldn't technically be accurate to the time because there was basically no Asian people, like Asian as in like Asian, Chinese, Eastern Asian type of that people in ancient Greece. Even though we see one on Odysseus' ship when rowing, and we also see one in the Suitors area where they feasting. I could make a nitpick about, oh yeah, Helen of Troy was described as being like this, and so she shouldn't have been portrayed by a black person, or that why are there so many black people in ancient Greece, even because there was like a very small proportion of people in ancient Greece, and there was no substantial population of black people in ancient Greece because most of the time they came just from trading. But I'm not going to just beat on a dead horse. I feel like that's for other YouTubers to beat on. It's not for me to beat on. Despite all of that, I'm going to rate the movie three ways. I'm going to rate it from the mythological standpoint, from a movie standpoint, and from an overall standpoint. So, movie wise, with the camera and the acting and all that other stuff that makes a movie, and of course, taking off some of the points for how they had to rush through some of the events and had to lower some of the screen time for certain characters that were more important. Um, I honestly, overall, movie wise, I give it a solid 8 to a 9. Depends. I'll say probably put it in the middle, 8.5, just to make it reasonable. Uh, mythology wise, frankly, from all the changes, a lot of the stuff that they cut out, a lot of stuff that was very important that they just opted to omit from the story at all because of the certain version of the Odyssey that they used, that Christopher Nolan used, and also just changing how some of the characters even acted in the story. It's going it's At first it was a 6, but now I'm dropping it down a point because I reread on on some of my notes regarding the Odyssey. So it's going down to like a 5.7. Overall, taking both the mythological aspect and the movie aspect and mashing them together, overall I'll say it's a solid 6. 6.7. It's a solid 6.7. Because I'm focusing more on the mythology rather than the actual making of the movie. I do like the amount of practical effects, the little CGI. So I mean, I don't really have much issue with that. But just overall, a 6.7. I can round it to a 7, but I feel like it's like at the cusp of 7. If they didn't change a lot of the stuff from the mythology, then I would probably bump it up to like a 7 or a 7.5. Either way, that's it. That's my review on the Odyssey. Frankly, I'd say if you are a mythology buff, watch it, make your own opinion of it, because my opinion's not the end all be all. I'm most likely missing a lot of stuff as well because I'm rushing to get this out because I watched this yesterday and I know I will be forgetting stuff. So yeah, watch the movie yourself, make your own opinion, and honestly, just I'm glad to see that mythology is getting a lot more movies now. Now they just got to make a Wukong movie, and then we'll be good. Or a Norse movie with Ragnarok, something not like Marvel, but like something how it was actually depicted. I thought you wouldn't see me again. Yo, this is editing zonicality here. Just finishing up the last bits of the video actually, and all I wanted to say real quick is to watch the mythology guys video on this. It'll be right here. And then also please check out the channel called History Buffs, cuz he's also a YouTuber that does like mythology stuff, but also history stuff. So he'll be right around here. Yeah. So please make sure that you go check those two out. They are much more knowledgeable in history and mythology than I am, and they are much more better authoritative on the subject, and they most likely have a lot more context and a lot more things that they can say about the movie that I cannot, and also they're just a lot more knowledgeable in general. So yeah. Anyways, thank you for watching this video, and sorry it took me so long to get this out, or get this out, and also I'll start working on another video from one of my streams, and also I'll be trying to do more stuff recently. Just things been tied up for me right now, but yeah. Anyways, Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day or rest of your night, and I will see you all next time. Peace.